And now, the Rink Rap podcast from Forever Blueshirts, talking all things New York Rangers hockey. Here's your host, Jim Cerny.
What's up, Blue Shirts faithful? Welcome to Rink Rap at Forever Blueshirts. I'm Jim Cerny, your host. Thanks for tuning in this week. And as you can look around, we're back in the home studio. We are not at Mustang Harry's this week. That was a lot of fun last week. Hanging out at Mustang Harry's. The Conroy brothers really took good care of us, set us up real nicely there, a nice little meal afterwards. But, you know, it's a cool setup. Be able to meet the Ranger fans, meet hockey fans, meet sports fans, just meet New Yorkers at Mustang Harry's, which is on 30th and 7th, of course, just a couple blocks from Madison Square Garden. We are going to be doing shows from Mustang Harry's down the road. So we'll keep you posted. You know, make sure to follow us on X at Forever Blueshirts or at Jim Cerny. That's the best place to find out where we're going to be doing upcoming shows at Mustang Harry's. I know last week we were up on the second level and I was hanging out. I had the bar behind me and everything. It was a good setup. Greg Fargo of the New York Sirens, the head coach of the New York Sirens, joined us. Ted Calamaris was there as well. And I was kind of overlooking the first floor where the bar and the, a lot of tables are and the booths and the TVs and all the action. So we did it from upstairs last week, but in the future, we're going to be downstairs. And especially when it gets nicer out near the spring and they open up the front there, we're going to get set up in front by the TVs among the people, take questions from the fans and all that. There's going to be a really cool interactive element to that. So that's up ahead on Rink Rap in coming weeks. Right now, listen, Olympic break almost coming to the end here. In fact, the Rangers are practicing, or the Rangers that are not over in Italy right now are practicing. And I'm sure their eyes were tuned to their teammates in a pretty cool quarterfinal game that went overtime before the United States knocked off Sweden 2-1. Quinn Hughes, oh my gosh. Quinn Hughes with that game winner for the United States in overtime after Mika. That's right, Mika, your Mika Zibanejad of your New York Rangers in a patented left circle, gets set up and scored that big goal for Sweden, with goalie pulled and tied the game, forced overtime before, of course, the United States and Quinn Hughes iced it with a 3-on-3 overtime game-winning goal. But pretty cool tournament for Mika Zibanejad, right? 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points in 5 games. He was Sweden's second leading scorer in the tournament. He was really good. A carryover from this season because Mika's been very, very good for the Rangers this season. Pretty much our most consistent player, game in, game out. Certainly among the forwards. He's been their most productive. Hell of a January. It started with the phenomenal record-setting performance outdoors at the Winter Classic, and then he carried it forward, had another, hat trick. I mean, it was a hell of a month, but it's been a really good season for Mika Zibanejad, and he carried it over into the Olympics. Good on him. Now listen, he's got 25 games with a non-playoff team ahead of him, so. Yeah, I'm sure. I hope for his sake that he was able to get everything that he could out of that experience. Though Sweden will not medal, they get knocked out in the quarters, and the United States, they're now in the semis. They're a win away from likely, not definitely, because you can't predict these things, but likely taking on Canada. That's what everybody in North America wants, right? In the gold medal game. But first, they got to get through the semis. They have Slovakia on Friday. Canada has Finland. Kakko in Finland. Kakko's playing pretty well for Finland, too. He's had a good tournament. JT Miller and Vincent Trocheck for Team USA. Right? Not bad. They played their roles really well. They play down in the lineup. They're fourth-line players. They're the top penalty killers on Team USA, and Team USA is 10 for 10 on the penalty kill so far in the Olympics. But those guys have played their roles really well. The stars are being the stars for Team USA. Quinn Hughes did that. Austin Matthews has done that. Still waiting on, I guess, Matthew Tkachuk's first goal, but he's been real good. Brady's been even better. Brady Tkachuk. The stars have been the stars for Team USA, but what makes them so good, Team USA, is that they're so deep. right? You get JT Miller, Vincent Trocheck. They're top 6 forwards with the Rangers. But, in Team USA, they're fourth line guys. And in Trocheck's case, he's kind of viewed as the extra forward, the 13th forward, because you can dress 20 skaters in international games. So, Vinny Trocheck, the 13th forward, but yet anytime they got to take a big face off, they're putting Vinny Trocheck out there late in the game. He and JT were out there when Mika scored that goal to tie it. Sully, trusting the guys that he knows. Didn't work out in that case. But when they started overtime, Vinny Trocheck took that opening face-off in overtime. He took another face-off in overtime, too. Now, he won the face-off and then got off the ice. But, it's a lot of value there. And Rangers hoping they can parlay that into a good trade heading up before the March 6th trade deadline. So even though the Rangers are back practicing, Chris Drury and company can't make any moves yet. The roster freeze is still in effect through Sunday. But then Sunday at midnight, the roster freeze opens up, and it's a 12-day frenzy from there to March 6th, from Monday through March 6th. The NHL GMs, and certainly Chris Drury, one of those, will be exploring. In the Rangers case, let's see what they can do in their retool in a 12-day span. They've traded Artemi Panarin. We talked a lot about it on the show last week. Of course, they got, the Kings' top prospect, Liam Greentree, who's played, has obviously had a real good junior career, and has played very well since the trade, finishing out his junior career there. But they got some draft picks too, nothing too big, but, moving forward, Vinny Trocheck, maybe Alexis Lafreniere, maybe Braden Schneider, maybe Brennan Othman. We'll see. We'll see. And these guys don't need to be all moved before March 6th. I know Chris Drury probably would like to do as much business as he can of rebuilding this roster and organizational depth. But he's under no pressure. Like, he was under pressure to trade Artemi Panarin before March 6th. And there was the second pressure point, the earlier pressure point of trading him before the roster freeze. So he had to do that. He knew he had to trade Carson Soucy before March 6th. And, like Panarin, unrestricted free agent. Okay. So he did that. A couple other UFAs on the roster, but, these were the guys that he could get something back for. But Trocheck's under contract for 3 more years after this one. Schneider is a restricted free agent with arbitration rights at the end of the season, and Lafreniere's under contract. So you don't have to move those guys. Brendan Othman, he's a RFA at the end of the season. You don't have to move him. So you don't have to, but yet you want to do a retool. You want to make these changes. So we'll see how Chris Drury plays it. If it's going to be a slow roll and this carries into the offseason, which I think in part it will. But I think if he trades Trocheck, I think it's going to happen before March 6th. We are going to get into all of those topics, like everything Ranger related, with Peter Baugh of The Athletic. He does a hell of a job over there. He and Vince Mercogliano teaming up on the Ranger beat over at The Athletic. Well, Peter's going to join us in the next segment. And again, we're going to go through some Olympic stuff, but mainly we're going to focus on what's next for the New York Rangers. And then also later on in the show, we're going to hang out with former New York Rangers forward, former NHL forward, former NHL coach, a guy that coached at Wisconsin in the NCAA, a guy that was a 1988 United States Olympian as a player. And then in 2018, he coached Team USA in the Pyeongchang Olympics. It's a big buildup, but that's Tony Granato. He's a really, really good guy, really great guy. Super excited to bring him on as a guest as well. So Peter Baugh is up next after this break. And then after that, we'll also chat with Tony Granato. So we got a lot of great hockey talk on the show this week. Thanks for tuning in to Rink Rap at Forever Blueshirts. When we return, Peter Baugh joins us from The Athletic. Welcome back to Rink Rap. I'm Jim Cerny here at Forever Blueshirts and joined by Peter Baugh of The Athletic. And we're not going to try and BS anybody. We're going to go straight to the truth. We're recording this literally minutes after Keller's golden goal in the United States rallies back against Canada 2-1 in the women's gold medal game. You're supposed to be able to capture these moments, right? What are your adjectives for this moment watching that game?
I mean, it was a heck of a game. I was coming back from Rangers practice, and so I missed part of it, but caught the end, which was very dramatic. And yeah, I'll give a shout out to Haley Salvian, who's
Oh
our
yeah.
reporter at the Athletic, who's there in Milan. She already had a story up on this at the Horn, and she's gonna I have, I'm sure, an amazing follow up story and more coverage in the coming days. So definitely, I'll give pretty basic adjectives of like it was exciting and really compelling and just I mean it's a great rivalry, maybe the best in sports, and Haley will do it justice with her story more than my more than my um adjectives.
Well, so you get the primary assist there. So Haley will slam in the goal. You get the
Yeah, sure.
primary. I got to get a
She's
secondary
doing
there,
all the
right?
work. You can get the secondary, but I'm really she's really taking it. I'm like the goalie when the goalie like taps it to
Yeah,
it does kind of
right. Like Jonathan Quick on Matthew Robertson's
yes, yes,
overtime winner, right? And so
yeah,
you were quickie for that one.
exactly. Yes.
It is pretty awesome. What about the men's side? I mean, the
Yeah.
quarterfinals too. You've been enjoying this?
Yeah, it's been I mean, like, it's a good time period. Like, obviously, the Rangers have been skating, so I've been going
Yeah.
to some of their skates, but I've had plenty of time to watch the hockey, and it's been really good hockey. I mean, yesterday was I felt like there were a lot of blowouts in the earlier rounds, but yesterday was kinda really came through and delivered some awesome games. So it was fun to watch. I caught most of the US game, all of the Canada games, some of the Finland game. I watched all the overtimes. So it was a great day of hockey and a lot of exciting stuff going on over in Milan.
So I'm sure your notifications are probably much better than mine on X, and I do say that sarcastically because we know what X can be. But my timelines after Mika's goal, where Sweden ties it, forces overtime against the United States. So the main things I saw in my notifications were, let's see, Mika. How come Mika doesn't do this for the Rangers? How come he never scored a big goal like this for the Rangers? He's never had a moment like this for the Rangers. So that was one part of it. And then the other part was, well, of course, JT got caught out of position. Did you see Trocheck played the shot, not the pass? So that basically sums up who follows us and listens to us and reads us and listens and all that. These people, they look for every little thing that's going to be angry
Lot
Rangers.
lot of negativity in the fan base right now, and I think Twitter is not the place to go for level-headed fan opinions.
Very good point. So you say you've been at practice, obviously, the last few
Yeah.
days, as things coming around. We see Adam Fox is skating. He looked close to coming back even before the break, but now he's had a couple more weeks, and supposedly you tell us. I don't think he's wearing the no contact jersey, and maybe even more importantly, it looks like Igor could be ready to go when the break ends.
Yeah, I mean, they've both I've kind of split it up with Vince Mercogliano, my
Yeah,
coworker. I've done 2 skates, he's done 2 skates. We've overlapped at 1. So I've been at 2 of the 3 and um that I would say Fox and Shesterkin look I mean they were scrimmaging today, full participants again. It certainly seems like when the break is done, they're going to be coming back and um maybe because of where the team is in the standings, the coaching staff considers not pushing Igor as much as to play as much as maybe it would if they were pushing for a playoff spot or whatnot. But
right,
at least from my perspective, we're not allowed to talk to Fox and Shesterkin since they're still on IR, so they weren't
right.
available for interviews. But they both looked pretty pretty full go at practice today and the other practice I was at.
It's interesting. Interesting. I don't know if that's the right word, but if you had told me before the season, whether the season was going well, whether the season was not going well, whereas somewhere in the middle, if you told me at any point, oh yeah, Fox and Shesterkin are going to get hurt the same game, they're going to be out of a month or more, 6 weeks or more, whatever the case ends up being, I would have told you, yeah, the Rangers can't survive that. Like those are the two to me, they're two most indispensable guys. But in a season that was not going great anyway, even when they were able to play, especially Igor was around more than Fox was, you talk about death knells. Did you feel that, after that January 5th game and certainly in the ensuing days where, we found out more that they were going to be out for a while? Was that your gut as well? There's no way this team can sustain this.
Yeah, I think I was writing at the time after the Winter Classic. I wrote that it was a big win, all of that, but I wrote pretty much that
Yes.
like this team, it needs to it has so little margin for error just with the
Yeah.
amount of games, and you can do like the math of what the point projections are for the number 8, the second wild card team, and what point pace the Rangers were going to need to play at. And they were going to need to play like an elite team the rest of the season just to make the playoffs. So knowing that was the case, as soon as you see Shesterkin and Fox go down in the same game, that's tough to overcome given the ground they needed to make up. And then you get into they started sitting Panarin and they trade
Oh, right.
Susie. Like
Yeah.
they just like they really the roster looked like a shell of itself pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And it already
And
a struggling roster to begin with.
right, exactly. And now what this season really showed was the lack of organizational depth that they had. It was
Yeah.
so thin at the NHL level anyway. Then Trocheck misses a month, Rempe misses a couple months, Edstrom's out a couple months. And so even those fourth line guys, when they're out, it's a big blow. You really feel it. And then of course, Fox has missed half the season, and Igor, misses 6 weeks. I mean, there's no way you could, can continue on if you're the Rangers in any form of contention. So that said, let's start there. How how can they in a retool? How can they actually rebuild the depth in this organization? Because it's non-existent. You see it on down through the prospect pipeline. You see it down in Hartford, and certainly at the NHL level. So, how long do you think this is going to take?
Yeah, I mean, to me, it certainly doesn't feel like a quick process, and I'm sure the Rangers would like for it to be quick. But just looking at it realistically, I mean, this is a team that its core is getting older. Its young players and prospects aren't overly skilled. There are a couple pieces that have some skill. And like you said, it's just not a very deep organization. Hartford's really struggled this year in the AHL level. The Rangers have some prospects in the OHL now with Greentree. They've got Malcolm Spence at Michigan, but these guys are certainly prospects, but you're not looking at them as I guess franchise saving played like high octane offensive players. Like they're going to have to find that somewhere, and that's probably going to take some time and development that the Rangers need to show that they're able to do. So you ask of how they fix it. I mean, the starting point has to be the draft, and they're going to have 2 first round picks this year, including one that's going to be really high. And if you look at the successful teams, like they nail their high draft picks, and you can call it bad luck or you can call it bad scouting, you can call it bad developing or whatever. But the Rangers haven't really done that. I mean, you look at obviously there's Lafreniere and Kako who both are NHL players, but maybe not what it was certainly not what you're hoping for with a top 2 pick in both of those cases. And then you have Lias Anderson and Vitaly Kravtsov, who are both out of the league. Like those are 4 top 10 picks that the Rangers had and whiffed on, and that's tough to come back from when you're looking at like an organizational depth and all of that. So it's a tricky spot to be in, and they're going to have to show some improvement in that regard of talent evaluation and hitting on really important draft picks.
Yeah, and the first rebuild from 8 years ago. The reason why they're going through another one now, obviously, is what you hit on.
Yeah,
They swung and missed big time on some top 10 picks. Like you said, you can argue if it's development, if it's just bad luck. We won the lottery, but this wasn't the year to win it.
yeah,
Uh, so there's some bad luck involved. There's all that as you touched on, but the game plan then, their strategy then was to get as many picks as possible. So what is it, like shooting in a barrel, shooting fish in a barrel, or whatever
yeah,
that phrase is, right? If you keep shooting and you got enough fish in there, you're going to hit one, right? You're going to hit on a couple. Um, by Chris Drury's letter that he sent out in January, he specifically was talking about, yeah, I think draft was mentioned, but it was more getting NHL players, getting NHL ready talent, young players that are there. So do you think that this approach is going to be different because they're looking to, again, retool, try and do this quicker than maybe you and I think it's going to take? Again, your thoughts on that, on the approach?
It's certainly possible. I think we'll see in the next few weeks are going to be very telling of if they
Yeah,
trade some of these players, what they look to get back in return. Like with Liam Greentree, Chris Drury in his remarks after the Panarin trade specified that they liked that he's close to being a pro, like he's pretty close to pro ready.
right.
Um, and the expectation, he didn't say this, but the expectation is he's going to turn pro after the his OHL season. So I think if you see the Rangers target is, say they trade Trocheck, it'll be interesting to see what the balance is of draft picks versus prospects that they get back. And some of that'll depend on what organization they're trading him to. If it's a team that has prospects close to NHL ready, maybe they get more of that type of package. So I guess in short, we're going to see a lot in response to that question over the coming weeks of what the approach is going to be, of if it's like stock up on draft picks, or is it you try and get some younger NHL players or younger players that are in college or in junior that are NHL prospects that you're expecting to be debuting in the not too distant future.
Right. I think you're going to be busy as heck those 12 days. Once the
Yeah.
lobster freeze ends at midnight,
Yeah.
better have rested up during this
Yep.
break here. So let's start with Trocheck.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was there for all the Alain Vigneault years, and he would always use this phrase: "If I was a betting man, if we'd ask him, oh, is Henrik playing tonight? If I was a betting man, that was AV's go-to." So if Peter's a betting man, you're betting on Trocheck being here past March 6th or not.
I'm not going to speak with any certainty, but I think I'd say the higher likelihood is that he gets traded. The Rangers have some leverage here if they don't have to trade him
Right.
because he has time on his contract. But I think given their situation and the period of time it'll likely take to turn this around, they're gonna want to make this move before he starts to decline. So if you were to ask me to guess, I would say he's traded, and I'll be curious to see how quickly it happens post roster freeze, post the Olympics ending, because I think it's going to be fascinating to see.
Yeah. And then this kind of cycles back to what the Rangers' plan was, collecting all those picks, all those first round picks, the first retool, rebuild, reset, whatever you want to call it. There were years they'd had 3 picks in the first round, and among those extra picks further down were guys like Keontae Miller and guys like Braden Schneider. And I bring up those two together because the Rangers made the decision last summer, probably before last summer, but they followed through on the decision to move Miller. They
Yeah.
didn't see that he was going to be a core piece that we're going to pay $7-8 million to moving forward. He just hadn't shown enough. So now Braden Schneider, who I believe is going to be a year younger than Miller was last year, he's 24. I think Keontae was 25. Uh, is in a similar boat, right? He's been here 4 or 5 years. He hasn't quite got, at least in my opinion, hasn't quite gotten to what was expected of him. Got a big opportunity this season. I don't think it's gone so great for him. Maybe a little bit in over his head. Um, but the key thing that ties him to Miller here again is he becomes an RFA with arbitration rights at the end of the year. So he's due a raise. He's still a couple years away from UFA status. So that's a big windup of saying, do you think Braden Schneider is part of this future core moving forward? Or do you think they view him? And I know it's reading tea leaves and you may not know, but or do you think it's more closer to the Miller comparison?
Well, when it comes to Schneider, I think it makes a lot of sense to listen. I don't think it makes sense to trade him just for the sake of trading him, because if I said Miller, it's Schneider.
Yep.
Like, this is someone that the Rangers have cap space. If they don't get an offer that they deem as valuable enough this deadline, like, they can hold on to him, extend him, or just like kick it to the off season and decide then. So I think it's certainly possible, but I don't know if I would say like with any certainty or likelihood, like, oh yeah, this is for sure
Yeah.
gonna happen. But he's kind of an interesting player he's really shown that he is an NHL defenseman, but he hasn't shown that I guess top four capability that you're probably hoping for when you have someone like him, like he hasn't consistently been able to. I mean, I think he's probably shown he can be a number 4 defenseman, but he hasn't been able to hold down the fort in a top pairing role as well as you'd like. The offense is present, but not as much as you would maybe hope. But he's certainly shown he's an NHL player, and that has value. And teams like big right shot defenseman, and maybe another team feels they can unlock some things the Rangers couldn't. Very similar to what the Hurricanes felt with Keandre Miller. They thought there was more there, and made the trade and went for it. So I think he's an interesting character because it's essentially comes down to the offers that they get. I think it makes a lot of sense to listen. I don't think the Rangers should trade him just for the sake of trading him.
Right. And I agree with that. I think they should listen on anybody and everybody.
Yeah.
Even if somebody's comes to them and says, we got to have Mika. You listen, you find out, you go to Mika, hey, that no move clause, you're still tied to New York. I think they have to listen on everybody. That's the spot that they're in. Because if we start Xing people out saying, well, you can't trade Braden Schneider, he's got to be part of the core. Can't trade Alexis Lafreniere, he's got to be part of the core. Well, then who the heck are you moving? Where's the retool?
Yeah, what was this letter if you're just going to sell off the RFA or the UFAs?
Right. That's exactly it. Now, I still think their biggest card to play though is Trocheck, right?
Yeah.
Because he would bring back the most value from a true contender. He'd bring back the most value, I would think.
That would be my guess. I mean, you look at what Brock Nelson brought the Avalanche last year. I mean, they got brought the Islanders from the Avalanche last year. They got a first round pick and Callum Ritchie, who's a legitimate prospect who's played a lot at the NHL level this year. I think if you're the Rangers, you have to expect to get at least that back for Trocheck, given the I don't think Trocheck's as good of a player as Nelson, but he comes with term. And I think that's really valuable. He's a big game player. So I think, yeah, you certainly are looking at him as your chip that can probably get the most back at this point of the guys who have any possibility of getting traded.
Right. And not hurting his value in the Olympics at all. Like that role, and a contender would look at it. I know all contenders aren't stacked like Team USA is at the Olympics, but okay, that's a fourth line role, but probably on a real legit cup contender, if he plays third line center, maybe power play 2, is a top penalty killer. You put him out there. You saw in overtime. Who did Sully put out there to take those faceoffs in overtime? It was Vincent Trocheck, right? That is massive value to a real true Stanley Cup contender. I agree. I think he's their biggest chip to play.
And there, I will say, I think wherever he gets traded, it's probably most likely that he's playing second line center rather than third line center, just because there's not a lot of teams that are
that deep.
Deep enough. I mean, the Avalanche could have him at 3C, but the Avalanche don't have the trade chips probably to get him this deadline. So it's yes, but he's your points. I think he's a good second line center, which is one of the hardest things to find in hockey. And he's an amazing third line center if you're able to somehow pull that off. So I think there are plenty of teams that would have a lot of interest in him. And I think we'll as this tournament winds down, we're going to start to hear more and more about that.
Yeah. So you look at the team, you're around them every day, right? And you study the prospect pool and everything, the draft picks, their history, their development history, it all. Who do you, as you look at this roster, who do you say that should be part of that core moving forward? The obvious, Igor is an obvious one. I would assume Adam Fox is in there for you as well, Gavrikov. But okay, I'm not going to answer the question for you.
Yeah.
But, who would be your core, and who among, maybe more importantly, among that younger set of players, either younger NHLers or prospects or guys just on the cusp, do you think should be part of that core moving forward?
Yeah, I think Fox and Igor are the two main ones. Those are the guys who give you some reason to believe that this could turn around somewhat quickly. Then there are a lot of guys who you just don't know, who you don't know because of I guess the no movement clauses. So that's
Right.
Gavrikov, Zibanejad, um, JT Miller, like those guys, you just might not have a ton of say in the matter. Like they're going to be the ones making the ultimate call. But I think any of those guys, given their ages, I would listen on. I would listen on them. I mean, I don't think Drury is going to want to trade JT Miller though after as much as he gave to acquire him. So I think that's a little trickier for me to see. If it were me, I'd say Fox, Igor, and I'd see what you have in a lot of these young guys. I think give Perot a long look, see what you have there. Laba, I wouldn't have any interest in moving him. Obviously, if someone offers you an amazing package, you have to listen. But Laba is someone who maybe can be your 3C for 7-8 years to come.
Yeah.
Like he's brings a lot, and he brings a lot of things that the Rangers lack with his speed. And then you go down into the prospects, and it's Spence, it's Greentree, it's EJ Emery. Like I would just really want to see what, if I were the Rangers, I'd want to see what they have in all of those guys before making decisions. So other than that, I think this is maybe what you're getting to in your question. I get Will Cooley is someone who I think is a young piece that you want to keep around, but there aren't a lot of guys that I would definitively be like, oh, they can't trade this guy. When you put out a letter like that, it essentially opens you up to the league of a message to every general manager that
Right.
you can ask on anyone. We will listen on anyone. Now, obviously, there are some limits on that, but I would kind of go in with the mindset of they're gonna make a lot of decisions on these players' futures, and we're gonna see who they believe in and who they don't.
Right. So elephant in the room. It seems last deadline, it was like this. A couple years ago, it was less like this. It was more of, how can we keep him and sign him and keep him here for a while because he was playing his best hockey. The elephant in the room always seems to be Alexis Lafreniere. I don't think there's a more polarizing player right now in the organization. A guy who, listen, he's a good NHL player, I think, but he certainly has not been what they've needed him to be. And now I'm real curious to see where it goes if he doesn't, well, I mean, I know he hasn't always been on Panarin's line, but, without that kind of safety net, Panarin gets moved and maybe Vinny gets moved. And so anyway, again, it's kind of a big wind up again.
Yeah.
I don't think he gets traded before the deadline unless somebody blows the Rangers' way, but I think they really seriously look into it during the off season. Again, that's just a hunch, a take. What's your hunch and take?
Yeah, I think I phrased it this way, I think on maybe the Athletic Hockey Show at one point. When it comes to Lafreniere, the question they have to ask themselves is, one, we know that his value is probably as low as it's ever been, but they have to ask themselves, is his value as high as it will ever be? Which is a bit of a dark place to be if you're the Rangers, but you've got to ask those hard questions of like, is this guy going to raise his value anymore in the next year, next 2 years? And I don't think you can definitively say that he will. He might, those are the kind of conclusions that they're going to have to reach and really think about. Because he hasn't helped his value each of the past 2 seasons after a really, really encouraging 23-24 season. So I think it's similar to Schneider. If you have no pressure of like, you don't have to trade him now, he's under contract. I actually think people refer to that contract as an albatross or whatever. That's a fine contract with the cap going up. Like
Absolutely.
that's what the going rate for a second line winger is going to be. So I think it comes down to that question. Do they think that his value is going to go up, stay the same, or go down? And if it is stay the same or go down, then you have to seriously consider trading him now.
Yep. Yes. I tell you, it's so funny, and I've been saying this funny. That's not funny, but the last year and a half, to see, how his game's gone after what we saw in the playoffs, to me, it was, 2023-24 was obviously it was a terrific year for him right now. It's a career year, but where he really won me over was in the postseason.
Yeah, he
He
was
was a
probably our
month,
second best forward that whole
right?
in that run. Yeah, he was
Totally
excellent.
agree. Consistent, two-way, and when a lot of the big guns really wilted against the Florida Panthers, I thought he took it up that next step. How does he get from there to here to here? Is it explainable?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is the player has to look inward and the team has to look inward. Like it's a probably a failure on multiple parts. Like I don't think he didn't go into the past 2 seasons thinking like he wasn't going to perform the way he wanted. Um, yeah, I think there's probably accountability to go all around of how a player kind of can take steps back like that. And yeah, it's for the Rangers has been one of the reasons that they're in this position is because you said this earlier, like the Lafrenieres, the Kakos, the Lias Andersons, the Kratzovs, like none of them have been what the Rangers needed them to be with top 10 picks. Like those are guys you need to hit on. And if the good teams have those guys who are young and skilled and coming to kind of I guess relieve the burden of the guys who are aging out. So the Kreiders, the Trochecks, the Panarins, like ideally you want your young guys ascending when those guys are declining and you can stay at the same level, but the Rangers weren't able to do that. As soon as the older players started to tail off, they made the decision to move on from them and didn't have anyone ready to kind of take over the mantle.
Yeah. I'll hit you with one quick final one. I appreciate all your time this
Yeah, no
afternoon.
problem.
And I hear the sirens outside. I don't know.
Yeah,
I hope
sorry.
they're not aimed at you or your car.
Nope, nope. It's
You-
just living in New York. You're gonna hear some sirens from time to time.
from time to time. So you're
Yeah,
saying 24/7,
yeah,
basically.
pretty much.
All right, but quick final one for you, and it's a real open-ended one, just about Sully. What do you think about the job that he's done? Because hasn't been an easy lift for the coach in his first season behind the bench with the Rangers.
No, I mean maybe fans are feeling more angsty towards Sullivan. It's hard for me to look at this as the failure that this season has been. It's hard for me to pin that on coaching. I thought at the start of this season, I thought that the Rangers had they were doing a lot of the things well that he was preaching. The defensive effort, the forechecking, they just weren't getting
Yes.
pucks to go in the net. They weren't scoring.
Yep.
And then as we've seen as the season's gone on, a lot of those little things have slipped. And I guess maybe you could pin that on coaching, but I think you can also look at the lineups he's had put out there, and it's a tough that's a tough job. Like these are not lineups that are designed to that are able to compete with the NHL's best. And you look at the East this year and it's pretty deep. Like it doesn't have the top level teams that the West does with Colorado and Dallas and Edmonton if you want to put them in there, in Vegas and Minnesota now. But there aren't a lot of teams in the East that are fully out of the playoff picture. So the Rangers are going against a lot of decent teams every night, and this roster is just not good enough. So it's hard for me to put too much of that on Sullivan. I think he's at the start of the season. I thought he had the team playing at as high a level as could have been expected. Maybe
Yes.
that's gone down a little bit, but I think some of that's human nature with the way things have gone.
Yeah, human nature, and I think it's something in the water at the Garden or something. Well, for sure at the Garden this season because they can't win
Yeah,
games at the Garden. But in general, even at the MSG Training Center, whatever, there's something in the water because even with Peter Laviolette, when he first started, everybody's bought in, we're buying in, and but yet before that season ended, Igor was bailing them out a lot. They were winning, but Igor was really bailing them out. And then of course it bit him in the playoffs for sure.
yeah,
As they played better personnel after the first round, better teams. And then of course, it cratered last season for multiple reasons. But talking about the structure, we were praising Laviolette at the beginning. They're playing structured again. Look at them playing defense. So there's something beyond the coaching, and I don't expect you to, know what that is or pinpoint it, but that's the way I feel about Sully too.
Yeah.
Everything you said, I'm like, man, they were bought in. Did you see them back checking and structured in their own zone? And then, and I know injuries is a big part of it. The lineup is a big part of it, but there just seems to be there's some disconnect that's going on there, even as new bodies come in and bodies go out.
Maybe it's disconnect, and maybe it's just the level of talent. Like this, I think that's ultimately what it comes down to in a lot of ways. Is like this is not the roster that they're putting out there is not a very good roster. So it's not going to be as good defensively. Other teams are going to be able to get it out of its structure because they're more dangerous offensively and able to do more things. So it's it's a really tough task when you have less talent. And I think we saw the team try to stay afloat early in the season when, like you said, they were playing this more structured hockey, and then that started to wilt as the season's gone. So maybe it's something in the water, but and I do think like the players have to look inward too. A lot of the Rangers
Yeah.
players they've needed. I mean, JT Miller has not had the season that they've needed. Lafreniere hasn't had the season that they've needed. There's not many guys if you go around that locker room that you can say, oh, that guy should be happy about the season they've had. I think Mika honestly has had a really nice season. He's
Absolutely.
one of the exceptions, but like it's so I think the players have to look inward to an extent, and then just like the roster as a whole, it's just not kind of what and to the front office sees that too. That's why they decided to send this letter out and start the retool process.
And I'd argue, and I wrote several stories about this. I'd make the argument that it's not just now. He didn't just Kurt's jury in the front office didn't just recognize that now. I mean, the moves that he was making last season, he started dismantling. Like he
Yeah,
saw this after really after the 24 Eastern Conference final, but he was
yeah,
hamstrung at that time. Like I had the feeling that it was just a frustrating time. He knew he needed to do something. He knew that, yeah, this isn't quite right, but they had zip cap space
yeah,
to really do anything of note to make those changes. And then, we saw what happened. He forced the hand of, Goudreau and Truba. And of course, that spun off in a negative way the other way, he maybe didn't handle it right, but I've had the impression that he's felt for quite some time now. Yeah, I gotta shake this up.
yes, but also it wasn't like he was going into this season like I'm going to shake this up and have us in a retool rebuild mode because you don't
True,
sign
true.
a 30-year-old in Gavrikov to retool. Like
Right.
I think you can look at the moves that they made and see that they were trying to be a competitive playoff level team this year. You don't get Mike Sullivan if you're trying to if you like are starting a retool like that. The intention going into the year was we're going to make the playoffs and take a crack at this thing. Like that's why they got Gavrikov. That's why they traded for Miller. Like they traded for JT Miller in the middle of all of this. You don't trade for a
Right.
32-year-old if you're planning on retooling. So I agree that he clearly thought that this team lacked something in the conference final against Florida. And I mean, a lot of that, like we saw throughout the year of like Igor was bailing them out. The 5-on-5 numbers weren't very good. They were relying so much on special teams, and then special teams went cold and they lost. Um, so I think it's reasonable that he reached some of those conclusions, but I don't think he reached the conclusion to fully start to dismantle everything and like in a more forward looking way rather than a win now way until some point this season when it became clear that there was no other path.
Yep. Oh, yeah, that's fair. And that's a good breakdown right there. Um, you know, yes, he recognized the changes need to be made, but you're spot on with this season. Right. You don't bring in Sully, you don't sign Gavrikov. You wouldn't have traded for JT last year if you
Yeah.
didn't think, okay, I weeded this out and now here we go. Now we're going to spin forward.
They made a huge bet on JT Miller. Like that was a bet on him as a leader, and as a hockey player. Like they traded for him to be a top line center, and he hasn't been that this
Yeah.
year. And he's definitely been banged up and all of that. But I think one of the things you have to wonder is like players when they're 30 233, like those injuries are going to keep happening. Like you're going to take longer to heal. Like that's a natural part of all of this. And so it's a difficult spot for them the Rangers to be in.
And it's not going to get better because you know what? Next year, he's 33. The year after that, he's 34. And he's still here for many years after that. Yeah. Peter, listen.
It's a big bet. And so far, it hasn't paid off.
And it has not. Indeed. Like I said, you're going to be a busy guy coming up. We really appreciate your time. I really enjoyed this, the back and forth and getting your insight. Would love to do it again down the road, maybe when we get a little clearer picture of what they did or what they didn't do, which might set up then what they're going to do during the summer. Certainly Chris Drury's not going to answer many questions about it. So we'll turn to Peter Baugh of The Athletic instead. How's that?
Sounds good. I appreciate you.
All right. Thank you. Thanks for joining us.